We invited him to be with us to share his story today because it's one of selfless leadership and a conviction to do what is right, not for himself, but for the greater good. So one thing Gary has asked is that he's going to be sharing some things with you that are not out for publication yet. So we're going to invoke, it's okay to keep taping, Steve, but we're going to invoke a cone of silence here this morning with a Las Vegas, what's said here stays here. Okay? So without further ado, please welcome Gary Norton.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Greg. I've never been introduced like that. And it's very true. There are lots of snipers. There's no money. And it's about wondering which one of them is going to shoot you. I think about 10 of them actually do shoot me every single day. But it's just a different 10 every day, so I can't blame anybody in particular. But thank you so much for the kind introduction and the invitation, and for the breakfast. A guy who goes to battle every day certainly needs a warm breakfast and good people, so I appreciate that. And Ralph, are you... Where's Ralph? Oh, there you are, okay. Thank you again for the invitation and to treating everybody. I was a little bit confused a few minutes ago. You said that there was an important speaker, so I thought, hey, aren't I supposed to be a speaker today? But no, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And for the cone of silence, thank you all for abiding by the rule that what happens here stays here. Kind of a silly thing to say when there's a videotape going, but that's okay. And but you know, the only exception to that would be you can tell people with power, influence, and money, if you wish, the things that we say today. But you know, everybody, many of us who are locals, some of those who are transplants to the area, know the story of the city of East Cleveland. We know the story of East Cleveland for whatever period of years we tend to think about it. So this year, we know the story of East Cleveland for the past few years, which is fiscal emergency, auditors coming in, saying that the city's on the brink of bankruptcy, there's talk about merger. Now, what's interesting to me is I read an article recently in Cleveland Magazine, a very good publication with good writing, several pages long. The teaser in the magazine, which is at the top, essentially said, East Cleveland, a community that was once home to the super rich, not just the rich, but the super rich, i.e. John D. Rockefeller, has been plunged into fiscal and political ruin. I just read that article in Cleveland Magazine, but it was written in 1986. Recently, I read a study about the city of East Cleveland that talked about housing trends, what it was called rapid resegregation. One year, East Cleveland was 70% white in population. 4 years later, it was 70% black. That happened between 1968 and 1972. So when I say we know about East Cleveland, we know about it for a chunk of 3 or 4 years at a time. What I have to grasp is that East Cleveland is roughly 100 years old, and this trend has been happening for about half of its lifetime. And when a trend happens for half of your lifetime, or for 50 years in our case, it finally comes to a head. And when we look at it intelligently, and when we take out of it the individuals, in politics we have a tendency to blame one another. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, I don't. We have a tendency to blame somebody. Somebody has to be to blame for the circumstance in which we find ourselves. Somebody has to be to blame. Is it the right person? Sometimes it is, other times it isn't. But in a city's 100-year history, if 50 years of that has been spent in decline, I would argue that there is no single person and no group of people to blame for that. Some of these things happened when I was in junior high school, others of them happened when I was in elementary school, others of them happened when my parents were in junior high school. So there's not a single individual or a group of individuals that we can blame. Having been the mayor of East Cleveland for about 5 years, which I guess if I broke a mirror at some point in my life, I'm 2 years away from the end of that sentence. I've realized this. I have fought politicians, I have fought political groups, I have fought businesses, I have fought for businesses, I have fought for political groups, I have fought for politicians. All the fighting is for naught when there's a system failure. In East Cleveland, what I recognize now is that there are certain assumptions that are set up in Ohio for a city to exist. A city set up to provide what is really the bedrock of the American dream for people in our communities. The American dream is that you can succeed and you can go anywhere you want to go, you can do anything you want to do, you will be safe, your investments will be safe, you can live a good life, and you can get a good education, and you can take care of your family. That's the American dream. Cities deliver that through police protection, through quality schools, through good infrastructure, through providing good homes with good value and good neighbors so we can all live together as communities and be the best Americans that we can be. The federal government doesn't deliver that to your doorstep. The state government doesn't deliver that to your doorstep. The county government doesn't deliver that to your doorstep. The city government delivers that to your doorstep. And as a mayor, it's pretty cool to know that you can be the guy or woman who's responsible for delivering the American dream throughout your community. But there are certain things that are true in 99.9% of the cases that are not necessarily true in the city of East Cleveland anymore. Cities are set up to run, for the most part, on income taxes, with some property tax thrown in, with some fees for trash removal and things like that thrown in, with a few grants thrown in, and with another support or two thrown in. Pretty much sets up a city to run financially, provide police officers, provide ambulances, provide fire trucks, make sure your streets are in good shape. Don't count the streets in good shape in March, by the way. That's more like a summer type of thing. But we remove snow, we remove trash, all those things. If the city's going well, you don't even think about what your city does. But when the basic formula of you have a certain population, you've got some businesses in your city, you generate some income taxes, your property values are relatively stable, and you can count on these revenues to provide things. When that formula goes wrong, then people start to pay attention. For the past 4 decades in East Cleveland's history, those system assumptions have begun to be eroded. East Cleveland's population in the 1970s was 40,000 people. Today it's 16,000. Imagine if your customer base went from 40,000 to 16,000. It might have an effect on revenue. You think? Maybe? Unless those 16,000 are willing to pay a whole lot more. If your customer base goes from 40,000 to 16,000, it might also impact the level of service that you can provide to each of those remaining 16,000 customers. There's something called an economy of scale. In Ohio, not only that, we have experienced diminishment in our city funding streams. Anybody ever heard of a place called Huron Hospital? Okay, you know it doesn't exist anymore. It's now a field. The Cleveland Clinic some years ago closed Huron Hospital. Anybody from the Cleveland Clinic in here, by the way? Good, I can tell the truth. I'm kidding, sort of. Cleveland Clinic is a wonderful organization, a world-class healthcare provider, and they had a satellite hospital in the city of East Cleveland. But Cleveland Clinic changed its business model. The Cleveland Clinic changed the way that it provides healthcare in the 21st century and in Northeast Ohio. Everybody loves change, but sometimes that change comes to you. Everybody loves change, everybody wants change, but nobody wants to be changed. When the Cleveland Clinic decided to change the way that it delivers healthcare in Northeast Ohio, that was our day to be changed. The closure of Huron Hospital took $1.5 million out of East Cleveland's revenues annually. So in addition to the decades-old non-functioning funding formula for cities that did not work in East Cleveland anymore, an additional $1.5 million was stripped out, which is the equivalent of about 10% of our budget. The next year, everybody loves tax cuts, and everybody wants the state of Ohio to be more financially responsible, and everybody wants a surplus created at the state of Ohio. So a certain governor decided to do that. He created a surplus at the state of Ohio by no longer sending local government revenue to cities where state revenues are generated in the first place. They just kept it at the state of Ohio. East Cleveland lost another $1.5 million that way, about another 10% of our budget. In 2 years, those two things happened to us. What we have to recognize is that that is not a mayor's fault. That is not a city council's fault. That is no individual or group's fault. It's a change in the way that we do things. On the private side in healthcare, the Cleveland Clinic changed the way that it does business. That change affected the city of East Cleveland. Some people said that it was racially motivated and said that it was done because low-income people use the hospital and the Cleveland Clinic just wanted to get out of the business of serving low-income people. But a few weeks ago, they announced the closure of Lakewood Hospital. So those business decisions do change communities. Everybody thinks it's a good thing for the state of Ohio to cut back on its expenses and use more money for things that the state needs, or actually to create a surplus to have the state in better financial shape. That's a good thing. But it affects cities and affects us by taking revenue away from cities. So these changes that are good in the world actually come home to roost in other places. And what leadership has to do is understand the reality and understand that this is a system problem. And that if nothing is done about it, in the case of my city, revenues will continue to diminish, people will continue to move out, businesses will continue to move out. The jobs that people used to have in the city of East Cleveland and in many cities were based in the auto industry and manufacturing. Those jobs have disappeared from the United States of America, never to return. We cannot, as a community, continue to hope for the return of residents. We can no longer, as a community, continue to hope for the return of jobs. We must address the economic circumstances from a system standpoint instead of blaming individuals. So why do I tell you all of that? I let you off easy because I didn't give you the long version. Believe it or not, that's a short version. But the end of it is this. Sometimes the best thing you can do, if your goal as an elected official and as a mayor is to ensure that that American dream is delivered to men, women, and children within your borders to the best of your ability, and that your job as a mayor is to ensure that it is not only delivered within your borders today, but for the next 50 and 100 years, you must make the decision to set up the structure so it works, that it will outlive you, even when it means putting yourself out of work. So all of this talk about mergers, it's about time that we do that. For the last 30 years, that conversation has been held. But a deep-held secret of elected officials, unspoken, in fact, probably unacknowledged ever, unless we're talking about other elected officials, who would then be politicians, is that politicians often preserve their own position and preserve their own authority and preserve their own influence at any expense, including diminished service to the people and continuing to operate a city government that should not be operated anymore, both from a financial standpoint and a service standpoint, and ultimately delivering the American dream. So one of the things you've guessed that I'll talk with you about today is my plan to participate in the merger, potentially, hopefully, cross my fingers, of the city of East Cleveland with the city of Cleveland. Many people think that we'd like to split up the cities, have the upper part of the hill go to Cleveland Heights, have the lower part of the city go to Cleveland. To me, that represents social inequity. You have to look out for people. And what's good enough for one city is good enough for one city. There is not any further socio-economic discrimination that needs to be visited upon the people of the city of East Cleveland, particularly their mayor who's putting them through this painful process. We are beginning our conversations with the community. This must be voted on by the people. It will probably be, if the current law stands, it will be at least a 2-year process. It's excruciating. There is room for a poison pill at many, many places in this process, and if it fails at any step, it will have to be begun all over again. I'm crazy. Well, I'm half crazy, which for East Cleveland mayors, half crazy is an improvement. But I am half crazy. For me, it is a political suicide walk. I'm doing something that today is unpopular among my own constituents. But I am convinced that doing the right thing will be the right decision and it will pass. It ultimately has to be passed by the voters. I'll outline the process for you very quickly because I know you probably have several questions. But everybody talks about merger. You notice that? Everybody, raise your hand if you've heard about a merger involving the city of East Cleveland. Okay, everybody, right? You ever heard how to do it? It's easy to say. You know, it's kind of the breakfast thing. You know, you're gonna bring the eggs, the chicken brings the eggs to the breakfast, the pig brings the bacon. You know, it's easy to bring the eggs if you're the chicken, but the pig bringing the bacon, that's a different story. I'm the pig bringing the bacon to the merger thing. But nobody ever says how to do it. So I looked it up. It's a pretty complicated process, extremely difficult process, but I am going to engage in it. It begins with a piece of legislation, a city council resolution from the city of East Cleveland's city council, which Greg told you about earlier. Where's Greg? Is he still? Greg told you my council loves me. They don't. They hate me. It's like going to a fan club meeting every week. I love it. I get to be told everything about myself. The city council could pass a resolution to the Cleveland City Council requesting that Cleveland enter annexation negotiations with the city of East Cleveland. My council will not do that. Anybody, by the way, they decided to try to recall me last week. Anybody ever? Yeah, I'll sign the petition myself right now. I don't care. I'm signing it through going through this process. So they could do that. That would be the easy way. But they won't. Another way to do it is a petition circulated and signed by a certain number of voters in the city of East Cleveland. Once that petition is complete, that petition gets submitted to the city council. And the city council, based on that petition, is then compelled to send that same resolution to the city of Cleveland, asking Cleveland to enter annexation negotiations with us. Now, the funny part about this is the city council is compelled because the state law says that if a city council receives such a petition, then the city council shall, anybody who's a lawyer, your eyes light up when you see that word shall in the law, shall pass this resolution. But what's going to be hilarious is that my city council doesn't really read the law, so they will think that they're elected representatives who never have to be forced to vote a certain way on anything. So you might see my city council hauled into court and a judge tells them that they have to pass this resolution. So it will be political theater extraordinaire when we do this. That's just the first part of it. So once we pass that resolution from our city council, it goes to Cleveland City Council. Cleveland City Council can vote to enter the negotiations with us. They can also tell us, go take a hike. And then I'm just out of a job for nothing. But we hope that Cleveland City Council will agree to enter the annexation negotiations with us. When that happens, a commission is formed. The commission consists of 6 people. 3 people appointed by East Cleveland City Council, 3 people appointed by Cleveland City Council. Now, my council is completely opposed to this. We had to drag them to court. We'll probably have to drag them to court to make them pass the resolution in the first place. Then it's their power to appoint 3 people to the commission. Now, what type of people do you think they're going to appoint to this commission? If they appoint anybody at all. So there's a tremendous delay there and perhaps some friction. Cleveland, I expect that Cleveland will appoint reasonable, rational people to this. That commission forms a plan. They have 4 months to do that. That plan goes to the election, just in the city of East Cleveland. The plan for annexation developed by this commission goes back to the people of East Cleveland to have their vote. Assuming that that vote is a yes vote, the ball's kicked back to Cleveland City Council. And I'll wrap up and go to questions in about 30 seconds. Cleveland City Council, now I'm a political science guy, I'm a local government guy. Cleveland City Council at that point has two options. One of them is amazing to me. Cleveland City Council can A, order an election for the entire city of Cleveland on that plan to see if the entire city of Cleveland votes to merge with the entire city of East Cleveland. Or Cleveland City Council, and this is the interesting part to me, can vote to accept East Cleveland's results and waive the entire election for the city of Cleveland and just annex the city of East Cleveland. So it's an interesting thing. It's calling reality what reality is, that when there are structural economic and financial problems that no longer allow you to provide the service that you expect as a constituent yourself and want to deliver as the chief executive officer, there comes a time where you must do something. And in your businesses, whatever they are, as important as they may be, can fold. Just go out of business, that's it. A city can't do that. There are still residents and businesses and property that needs to be protected by police. There are still residents, businesses, and property. If somebody has a heart attack, if somebody has a car accident, whether they're from here or from India, on Euclid Avenue, our East Cleveland EMS ambulances will show up and get them to a hospital. We can't just go out of business. If there's a fire, somebody has to put it out. So we have to do something responsible. Merger is what I'm advocating. It's all a secret right now, but if you know people with power and influence just like yourselves, feel free to talk about it with them. So I'll open up to any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
Mayor, what are the benefits to the city of Cleveland for that annexation, potential annexation?
Okay. There are many. East Cleveland does still generate millions of dollars in tax and grant revenue that would become Cleveland's. So that would go there. There are some things. Geographically, East Cleveland is located immediately to the east of a tiny place called University Circle. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. University Circle, to me, is landlocked. They are the second fastest job growth center in the state of Ohio, and they're building things in shoeboxes right now. Many people want to be either live, work, play at University Circle. There is demand for about 3,000 units of housing in and around University Circle, but the place is pretty much landlocked. We offer immediate and accessible, low-cost, shaky ownership, tax delinquent, all sorts of things, land, all the good stuff that you guys like, right? Yeah. Black folks don't get this. You know, I'm kidding, by the way. I'm kidding. No, I'm not really kidding. But there is readily available land, developable land, next door to University Circle that expansion could come up Euclid Avenue. It's natural progression. That would certainly be an attractive proposition, I would think. GE Nela Park is located physically in the city of East Cleveland. That would be a corporate headquarters available for lots of things. There is infrastructure, there's access to highways, there's very good housing stock in many cases, believe it or not. Millionaires Row, those large mansions, many of those are in East Cleveland. Some of you have heard about Forest Hills Park. Forest Hills Park, 3/4 of Forest Hills Park is located in the city of East Cleveland. 1/4 of it is located in Cleveland Heights. Part of the importance of merging us all or none, Forest Hills neighborhood, where I live, is one of the nicest neighborhoods in Cleveland right off the bat. So there are a number of opportunities, a number of benefits to the city of Cleveland. East Cleveland, benefits to East Clevelanders, East Cleveland charges a full 2.0% income tax for residents and people who work in East Cleveland. The residents of East Cleveland who work in Cleveland, if we merge our city, one of their income taxes would go away. That's a good deal to me. The city of Cleveland charges residential water rates for Cleveland residents that are lower than suburban. For us, our water rates would go down immediately. We'd have more reliable services, we'd have better services, but we'd also have access to capital. Cleveland's budget is $1.3 billion. East Cleveland's is 10 million and shrinking. Yet we've got $100 million in infrastructure repairs that need to be done. We've got $100 million in capital improvements and repairs that need to be done. Caving in streets, traffic signals, things like that. We've got major things that need to be done. Did I mention that East Cleveland hasn't had a credit rating, bond rating since 1986? Imagine for the last 30 years, you have had to do everything based on the cash you have in the bank and the inability to borrow anything. Streets cost $1 million a pop to repave. Fire trucks cost $1 million a pop, and now our budget is $10 million. It's a very, very difficult thing. So I promised Ralph and Greg that my answers would be long. Now you have an example of one of my very long answers. But they're thorough. Man, they're thorough. Man, that guy's good. All right, so I'll try to get in as many as I can, but I do want to be thorough because people need to know about these things. And without this type of discussion, people will not know. Reverend. You got to get to the Reverend, right? I need to be saved too.
Mayor, I commend you. I live in Euclid and I work downtown, and so I drive to East Cleveland almost every day.
Yeah, I've seen the videos of the traffic cameras.
I'm curious, the faith community can be a supporter and an advocate, or it can be a very loud opponent, and I'm curious how the faith community in East Cleveland is playing with this.
I think, well, I've approached just a couple members of the faith community, and they understand. After a while, people understand what having no money really means. So those couple that I have approached have agreed to be a part of the effort. There will be some who just refuse to merge. There's nothing I can do about that. I'll pray for them. But in the end, once we share the facts with people, and quite frankly, no offense, when we paint the picture of what will happen if we don't do something, we're going to scare the hell out of people. We need to scare God into some of them. I think that once the facts are lined up, in politics, there's a certain group of people that you will never, ever reach. I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to the people who have some understanding of what life is, what finances are, what economic realities are, and whether they want police to protect them if somebody breaks in their house or not. If they want an ambulance to show up when they have a heart attack or not. Those are the bottom line questions. Yes?
What is the plan that your opponents are proposing?
Get rid of me. And you know, I'm cool, right? I took Bruce Ennis's class of media relations.
Bruce Ennis?
Yeah. Bruce Ennis, a great class on media relations. He said, tell the truth, tell it all, tell it first.
Yep.
That's what we do. We tell what the reality is. We tell what the future will be. And sometimes a politician stalls because in the middle of answering your question, they forget what it is. You're witnessing that right now. What the hell was your question? I told these guys I'd be honest. I'm sorry.
What is the solution on your...
Oh yeah, that's right. Nothing. They want to get rid of me. Oh, and the reason why I said I've taken the class is because I finally stopped fighting people. You can't fight nuts. These guys are nuts. They're nuts. And I finally just said, in a city where there's no money, politics becomes vicious and it becomes personal. Removing a mayor does not have any impact on structural revenue. That's it. And if they've got a better idea, that's fine. But for the past 50 years, people like that have prevented us from doing something that really matters. And if there's one thing that I stand for, If you're going to do something, do the best possible thing that you can do and just fix the problem for good. And anything else that we do is just kicking the can down the road, because at some point it's going to come to this. I hope that answers your question. See how short that one was? All right, good. Wait, so they're going to think I discriminate against people in the back. So let's go. Somebody in the back had their hand up, right? Yes?
What are the main arguments that they're giving against the merger, your opponents?
That I'm corrupt. And I'm crooked.
And what are you supposed to get out of it? Or you're getting payoffs or something?
I guess. My house needs to be painted. You come by, you see the primer on it right now. My garage door busted, I couldn't replace it. I'm broke. But the reality is they want to make it a personal and vindictive campaign, only to replace me with somebody who will face the same economic realities and perhaps be in worse shape, and will take a few years to come to the point that I'm at. But because politicians preserve their own at the cost of all, it will likely be a person who is of that ilk, and not of the type that is like me and says, look, we've got to do something to change this. This cannot go on any longer, and I am the first one to be put out of a job. In fact, most of the city employees will be fine. They'll be transferred and become City of Cleveland employees if they wish. The only one is me. I'm just out. But again, the opponents really offer nothing. They want autonomy, which is great, but we were talking today, it's wonderful to want things. But if there's no money to pay for them, you just want them. And you still want them. But there's no money to pay for them. And you still want them. But there's no money to pay for them. And it's just a continuous vicious cycle of people who will make promises about what we can and should and could have done, but we didn't do, so now they want their turn to do it. That's the only thing I can say in terms of the opponents. Yes?
You mentioned the 6-person annexation commission. That sounds like a potential real stumbling block if council doesn't appoint anybody. So what's your strategy for dealing with that?
Well, God, I'm glad we're not videotaping this. I have told a few key people who will have influence and a direct role. I'm a Democrat. You probably could have guessed that by the mere fact that I'm African American. I got elected and I live in the city of East Cleveland. You could have guessed I'm a Democrat. We have told some of the statewide, not the legislative and things like that, but some of the statewide office holders what we intend to do and how long the process would be. What I love about Republicans, you know what they said? Both of them. You want us to change the law? I love it. I mean, I'm a Democrat, I'm black, I'm trying to figure out how to work with no money. They just want to change the law. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So in the beginning I said, if the law stands as it is, what I would like to see, quite frankly, a couple changes in the law. And I'm not smart, so maybe there are others that could be made, but that process I outlined to you. I'd certainly like to see that commission. Currently, it's 3 council appointees, 3, councils are temples of talk, and that's a good thing. But there's no real drive and direction that comes from a city council. The drive and direction, whether it's the federal government, the state government, or the local government, the drive and direction comes from the executive, which is the mayor. I'd like to see at least 1 or 2 mayoral appointees on that commission from each side. That way, they get their marching orders, they know what to do, they know what a timeline is. In addition to those 1 or 2 mayoral appointees, or have the whole thing appointed by me, that would be great. Then it would get done. But, simply because it has to have some drive and direction and an end date and end goal, I'd like to have some mayoral appointees there. Secondly, the commission has 120 days to do its work. If you give a commission 120 days to do its work, it's going to take 120 days to do its work. I'd like to have that cut down to like 3 or 4 hours. But again, it's full of potential stumbling blocks. And it's a piece of legislation, it's a law that's hardly ever used. So in our situation, if the law is hardly ever used, try and tailor it to a situation that really needs it. Okay.
You mentioned that you haven't had a bond rating since 1986, so almost...
Don't rub it in.
It's almost 30 years that you've been dealing strictly with cash. So do you have no debt?
Yes, we do have debt.
Okay.
But we don't have much. And this gets to another technical thing about bankruptcy. People are bankruptcy, bankruptcy, bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is for people with a lot of debt. And companies with a lot of debt. And cities with a lot of debt. They refer to Detroit. High profile bankruptcy came out of it. We could do that too! Whoever compares East Cleveland to Detroit is a damn fool. There is no comparison between a city that used to have over 1 million people and a city that has 16,000 people. There's no comparison. And when it comes to their responsibilities to their retirees, Ohio cities have the Ohio retirement systems. Once an employee retires from us, they are the property of the pension system. The city has no more obligations to that employee financially. In the case of Detroit, they pay their employees pensions. The monthly retirement check that Detroit employees get, Detroit pays them. I couldn't believe it. And they also pay their health care. I couldn't believe that either. Those are tremendous future liabilities. For that, yeah, you need bankruptcy. But for a city that doesn't have that, hasn't had a credit rating, only got a couple of loans, our debt, for the most part, is because we bought stuff and we didn't pay people for it, which is bad, which is bad. You know, unless, you know, you don't want to get paid for the things you gave.
My real question is, how did you decide to merge with Cleveland and not put it up to see if other cities may be interested? If the debt is very low, they're not taking on a lot of reliability there, and you have these opportunities with land and housing and
Sure.
a large company already.
Hunting Valley's just too far away.
Yeah, well, you know, we could build a bridge. We could build a bridge. I mean, we have the county fund it, they build the bridge, and we could walk to there, and we'd be technically connected. First, you have to merge with a contiguous community.
So there are some parameters that need to be there.
Yeah, there are. It has to touch. So the only ones that really touch in our case are Cleveland Heights and Cleveland. You know, naturally, it would be a decent fit to have my neighborhood sent to Cleveland Heights. I'll be honest with you. The Forest Hill neighborhood, it would be a decent thing to have that become part of Cleveland Heights. It really fits. But in reality, you know, there's some social justice elements. You know, I don't want to do that. And I'm the mayor. But the people could certainly make that choice, but I would just argue against it. East Cleveland, as a whole, needs massive investment. It needs to take advantage of economies of scale. The economy of scale, for whatever you may think about the city of Cleveland, the economy of scale in this region is Cleveland. We are blessed and fortunate, given our circumstances, that we do border Cleveland. If we didn't, it would be tough to merge with another smaller city simply because of the economies of scale. Just think about, you know, cities get used to serving their geographic area. They get used to serving their population and know what they're dealing with. The city of Cleveland has a population of roughly 400,000, just shy of 400,000. They absorb 16,000, not a big deal. Cleveland Heights has about 40,000. If 40,000 were to absorb 16,000, huge deal, with $100 million of delayed infrastructure repairs. So I hope that kind of gives you a sense of what would go on. Bruce.
I like the way you started off your presentation. We've all heard of merger, but very few of us really understand what's involved in merger. I think the same is true of municipal finance.
Yeah.
All right. Is there? My question is there a second path toward merger? I mean, we've all heard of fiscal emergency, but I certainly don't really know what that means. Is there a way for the state to compel a merger and bypass the system that you just pointed out?
Interesting question. I'm glad you brought that up. To my knowledge, well, I'll start it this way. You see what happened in Detroit? There are other cities in California and things like that that have gone through bankruptcies. Very seldom do you hear about a state takeover. Detroit was about as close as it came. There is no emergency management provision in Ohio to do what was done in Detroit. The state laws are different. The state law that is required in order to make that happen just does not exist. And everybody's heard this phrase, home rule. Cities have home rule. Cities have charters and govern themselves with mayors and city councils by choice, set up 100 years ago. There is tremendous respect for that. Now it's dwindling, but there's always tremendous respect for that when it comes to local self-governance in Ohio. So those are two of the reasons why those things, if they could have done it, Bruce, they would have done it already. And what I'm doing, quite frankly, Republicans dominate Ohio. As cruel and heartless and blood-sucking as Republicans are, that's a fact. It's not just my opinion, it's a fact. I don't think that they want to deal with the political perception that would be created by having a Republican takeover of an unfortunate African-American city in this region. I think that I'm doing us all a favor by working diligently to inform a community and hold responsible discussions designed to just put all the facts on the table, and then at the end of that discussion, leave a choice of what people want their future to be, and to merge the city, put us out of business. Because in the end of it, you know, for all the sniping and all of the backstabbing, treachery, murder, politics is really the contest of ideas. And it's the idea that we can remain what we are and have conditions deteriorate, or we can restructure, reconfigure ourselves and join an economy of scale where things will be at least stable for the future. So again, going back to your question, state takeover versus local, I like the idea that people in America, in a city that is financially distressed and of a certain socioeconomic status, can and will hold responsible discussions and come to a conclusion that is hopefully rational. And now when Ralph stands up, that's it, man, we're done.
Let me just say, Bruce, I think you and Barb need to lock the mayor in your office, and he's sugarcoating way too much.
Oh, way too much.
You need to work
too
on
much truth.
Yeah, you got that truth telling here, because he's really sugarcoating.
Yeah, well, I'm bashful. I'm very bashful.
Man, you are fantastic. My heart goes out to you. I am truly inspired by Gary. He's facing one of the most difficult tasks that any public official could ever face, and he's going after it with a sense of humor and a sense of inevitability. And I want to say this, Gary, we've had some great leaders speak here. Akram Boutros, Frank Jackson, Toby Cosgrove, but I think you are the best we've had in 10 years. So thank you so much. And furthermore, I am a blood-sucking Republican, and anything I can do to help you, call me. And if you ever run for other public office, I'll write a check for you. And not even if we don't agree on half of what. So once again, thank you so much, Gary, and thank you so much for being here. And please join us in
May 14th.
And who will be speaking?
We will have Chris Thompson.
Yes.
Fund for our economic future.
Yes, Mark.
Is it actually okay for these leaders to bring a high potential colleague that they think might fit into this group?
Yes. Good question, Mark. By all means. If you happen to know of another high-level or medium-level leader, or someone you would like to encourage to be a high-level or medium-level leader, please invite them, bring them along, and we'll be offering the same discounted rate as we always do for those extra guests. So thank you so much.
Dan Malthrop is in May.
Yeah, Dan Malthrop will be here in May. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, thanks again. Class dismissed.